Welcome to another wonderful Brenda Maxfield audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Amish romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Brenda Maxfield, Amish romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Naomi's Choice is the final book in a 3-book series called Naomi's Story. And now, Naomi's Choice. Chapter 1. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. Proverbs 16 verse 9, King James Version. Naomi stood on the porch and stared at the empty parking spot under the elm tree. Early that morning, Justin Moore's white sedan had been parked there. But true to his word, he was long gone. Naomi closed her eyes and exhaled with a heavy, relieved sigh. It was over. He would never return. She pressed her hands over her heart and forgave herself for her wild imaginings over the last few weeks. She'd known from the first moment there was no hope of a relationship with an Englischer, but he'd been charming. Truth be told, he'd been more than charming. But it wasn't right. Nor was it possible, and surprisingly, she felt that her heart was awakening to someone else. Her eyes misted over, and she prayed that it wasn't too soon to feel such stirrings. Isaac had only been gone a year, and she still missed him, and so did her 2 children. She straightened her back. But Isaac was gone, and she was alone. She hated to admit how lonely she often felt, how long the nights stretched in her wide empty bed. How, even in the late summer, her feet grew cold, and Isaac's legs weren't there to warm them up. A distinct clip-clop sounded, and she turned to see Mary coming up the drive. Naomi stepped down the stairs and shaded her eyes as her friend approached. "Mary," she said with pleasure. "How nice to see you." Mary's face was a study of concern. "Naomi Byler, what in the world did you do to Zach?" Naomi blanched. "To Zach? What do you mean?" Mary pulled up on the reins, and her pony jerked to a stop. She scrambled out of the cart and took Naomi's arm, pulling her up the steps and onto the porch. She collapsed into a rocking chair and indicated that Naomi should do the same. "What's going on?" Naomi asked, becoming concerned. She hadn't done a thing to Zachariah King. Although now that she thought about it, after he'd left her fields early the day before, he hadn't returned. "I know Zach is only leasing your fields. But as I've hinted many times, I think he's sweet on you." Naomi flushed. Where Zach King was concerned, her thoughts usually ended up in a confused mess. Zach had been strangely communicative lately, not to mention, he had been spending a lot of time with her 5-year-old son. Of course, Ben loved it. The poor boy had been starving for male attention ever since his father had passed. "I saw Zach mid-afternoon," Mary went on. By the look on his face, his world had turned upside down and inside out. Naomi's flush deepened. She knew he'd been upset about Justin Moore visiting her again and staying in her bed and breakfast. The man often won't speak a word, as you well know. Mary smoothed her apron over her lap. But yesterday, he talked. I nearly swooned dead away. Said he was making a sign for you. Naomi's eyes went wide. "A sign," she uttered. "Jaw. For your bed and breakfast." "No. No." She shook her head. Zach was making her a sign? What happened? Naomi collapsed against the back of the rocker. "Oh, Mary. What a right fine muddle this is." Mary frowned. "How about you tell me what's happened?" "Justin Moore sat my bed and breakfast last night." "Justin?" "Wait, Ain't he that Englischer fellow? Wasn't he your first guest? Jaw. What was he doing back here? Naomi groaned. He came to bring me a gift. Mary's eyebrows shot up to the top of her forehead. A gift? I didn't take it. Naomi paused. At first, she'd agreed to take it. In fact, she'd been glad for it. Excited. But in the end, she realized it wasn't right. Accepting that gift would have opened a door she didn't dare walk through. She sighed deeply, not wanting Mary to know all those details. Justin ordered a sign made for my bed and breakfast. It was to be delivered today. Mary began rocking, pushing her plain black shoes against the porch boards. Mercy sakes. Mercy sakes. What exactly did Zach say to you? Not much. Just what I said, that he was making you a sign. Naomi blew out her breath. He's sweet on you. Mary stopped rocking and leaned forward. He's a good man, Naomi. A right good man. I know. I know that, Mary. What are you going to do? Naomi squeezed her hands together on her lap. I have no idea. Mary stood and brushed imaginary dust off her apron. Well, I wanted you to know what he said. Now, I've delivered my message, and I need to be getting back to my own chores. Naomi jumped up. Thank you for telling me. Mary took a step down and then turned back to Naomi. This Englischer. He coming back again? Naomi saw the worry on her face. No. He's not coming back anymore. Mary nodded. Good. And with that she clambered back into her cart, clucked her tongue, and rode away. Naomi sank back in her rocker. So Zach had been making her a sign. No wonder he'd reacted so strongly when Justin announced his gift of a sign. She grimaced. But why hadn't Zach said anything about it to her? Was she supposed to read his mind? She gripped the arms of the rocker and shook her head. The man was beyond frustrating. 1 minute, he would act tender with her, and the next, he was like a cold brick walking away in silence. She remembered her recent conversation with Mary when her friend had told her about Zach's first love, Marcy. That girl had stomped on his heart, but good. While Naomi listened to the story, she'd been angry at Marcy, wondering how anyone could be so cruel. Now, she wondered whether Zach considered her cruel. But still, how was she supposed to know about his sign if he didn't tell her? Making a quick decision, Naomi rose and walked down the steps and out to the barn. On the way, she scanned the fields, looking for Zach. It didn't take long to spot him. He was out in the far right field, bending over the fence. It was hard to make out what he was doing from that distance, but she supposed the fence needed mending again. The posts were old and half-rotten, and Zach was always fussing with them. Naomi wondered why he bothered. It wasn't as if a herd of wild cattle was going to trample through and crush his crops. But the previous owners had put the fences up, and Zach felt obliged to maintain them. Naomi hesitated for a moment, watching him. He cut a fine figure out there. Tall and sturdy. She closed her eyes and visualized his stark blue eyes gazing at her. He had a way of looking into her as if he saw her very heart. It was unnerving to say the least. But she found herself seeking him out, wanting him to see her, hoping he would come by. She shivered. All this was too much. She'd thought when she'd married Isaac that she was finished with all this courtship business. Courtship business? Was that what she was thinking? Was she falling for Zach? Did she think he was fixing to court her? She turned toward the barn and went inside. Whether she was falling for him or not, she wasn't going to be the cause of his pain. She wasn't going to add to the hurt Marcy had inflicted on him all those years ago. She grabbed a shovel and carried it down the drive to the road. The sorry-looking bed and breakfast sign she and her 11-year-old daughter Katie had made was still staunchly in place. Naomi began digging up the rocky dirt around its base. They'd planted it deep to ensure it wouldn't fall over, something she regretted right then as she worked through the stony ground. The late summer sun could still pack quite a sizzle, and it wasn't long before she'd worked up a sweat. She was nearing the base of the sign now, and it was leaning precariously to the side. One more shovelful ought to do it. She was glad she wasn't barefoot like usual. Using a shovel without shoes wasn't a pleasant experience. She shoveled the last clump of dirt from the hole, and the sign gently lay over onto the ground. The poor thing looked like a felled tree. She gave it a grateful smile. "You may be ugly, but you did manage to bring in a few customers," she said. She bent down and pulled it from the hole, wondering whether she should leave it lying there or take it back to the barn along with the shovel. "What are you doing?" Naomi spun around and faced Zachariah. He stood with his legs apart and a look of confusion on his face. "I thought you were out in the field," she exclaimed. "I needed some wire for the fence." He took a step closer, and she was deeply aware of his scent of work in fields and hot sun. "Oh," she swallowed. "Won't those sign people take care of this? Surely, that fancy place the Englischer hired doesn't expect you to pull out the old sign yourself." The disdain in his voice sounded unnatural coming from his lips. She straightened her shoulders. "You don't think so?" His sarcasm sparked something in her, and she found herself rankling under his gaze. "How would you know?" His jaw twitched, and his eyes darkened. "I don't know. I thought I'd make things easier for them," she snapped, wondering what in the world she was doing. Why didn't she simply tell him that she'd refused the sign? That it wasn't going to be delivered at all? "Where's your guest?" Zach asked, his voice stiff. "Not here." Again, why didn't she simply tell him that Justin Moore had left? For good. Zach bent over and picked up the old sign. Without a word, he hoisted it onto his shoulder and headed back to the barn. Naomi scrambled to catch up, annoyed with both herself and him. Why couldn't they have a civil conversation? Why must everything concerning Zachariah King be so hard? He lumbered into the barn and tossed the sign against the wall. He turned and took the shovel from her hand and set it beside the rake and hoe. She regarded him and wondered at his obvious anger. Was it all about the sign? And just when did he plan to tell her about the one he was making? "For your information, Justin left," she blurted. Zach's gaze settled on her face. She saw his lips tighten, and she knew he was trying to read her. "Did you hear me?" she asked. "I heard you." He continued to assess her. Her pulse was racing, and her throat went dry. Now was the perfect time for him to say something, anything that might give her an idea of his intentions, but he didn't speak. Naomi couldn't take her eyes from his. It was as if he'd pulled her into some kind of vortex, and she was struggling to keep her head above water. Finally, he spoke. "He coming back?" She shook her head. "When's his sign coming?" "It's not." He stiffened, and his brow furrowed. "What?" "It's not coming," she repeated. "So, why'd you dig up that one?" he asked, motioning toward the old sign with a nod of his head. Frustration surged through her. She wanted to shake him until he lost that dark curtain he wore over his face. Shake him until he admitted he was making a sign for her. "You tell me," she said, stretching up even taller. He gaped at her, and she saw a dawning come over his face. "Mary," he muttered. He let out his breath in a heavy sigh. "Mary. And why not you? Why didn't you tell me? Was it to be a surprise?" He shook his head, staring at her. Not a surprise. So why not tell me? He blew out his breath. It isn't done. She closed her mouth, taken back. That made perfect sense. So, you were going to tell me when it was done? No, he tapped his hat a bit lower on his forehead. I was just going to set it up for you. But why didn't you say something about it yesterday when Justin told me about his sign? He frowned. Really? You wanted me to say something then? She was glaring at him now. Did he care for her or not? And if he did, why didn't he make any effort to make himself clear? Why did he just rumble about the farm, watching her when he thought she wasn't looking? Disgusted with the entire subject, she swirled on her heel and marched out of the barn back to the house. She had been married. She wasn't used to this kind of bantering and maneuvering. She wasn't a teenager anymore, she was a grown mother of two. She stomped up the steps of the porch and flung open the screen door. Striding inside, she went straight to the kitchen and dug out the ingredients for a massive batch of cookies. She had a sudden hankering for something sweet. Chapter 2. Ma'am, Ben called as he raced into the front room. How come the sign's in the barn? Naomi looked up from her ledger. I took it down. But how come? Benjamin, look at the floor. You've done tracked in a barrel full of dirt. Ben looked down at his thick-soled shoes. Clumps of dirt clung to their sides, some of which had fallen to the floor. He gazed behind himself at the trail he'd left. Sorry. Get the broom. But why's the sign down? Because Mr. King is making us a new one. She set down her pencil, happy to take a break from her figuring. Ben's face lit up. He is? Good. He can do anything. A weariness settled over Naomi. Ja, I suppose he can. He gonna stay for supper again? No, she answered before he could go further with the idea. The very last thing she wanted was another confrontation with Zachariah King. Why not? Ben, don't question your elders. Now, go get that broom. Okay. He hung his head slightly and turned to go. Then he swirled back to face her. But ma'am, Mr. Zach loves your cooking. He said so. Naomi sighed. Ben? The broom. I'm going, he mumbled, heading off to the washroom. Naomi looked at her page of figures. She needed to buy a calculator. All this adding and subtracting was giving her a headache. Lots of Amish folk used calculators that ran on batteries. She'd even heard tell of calculators that used the sun to work. She never could figure why her dad opposed it so. Maybe because ciphering came easy to him, but it surely didn't come easily to her. She picked up her pencil and squared her shoulders to tackle it again. She glanced out the front window and saw a billow of dust accompany a light green car coming up the drive. She set the pencil back down and went out to greet whomever it was. More guests, perhaps? The car came to a stop, and a young man got out. Howdy, ma'am, he said with a wide smile. We're looking for Byler's bed and breakfast. We stopped a ways back and someone directed us here. You've come to the right place, she said, excitement stirring in her chest. She wondered how this young couple even knew of her bed and breakfast, especially since she'd taken down the sign. But that didn't matter. They were there. How can I help you? We're wanting to stay a couple of nights. His voice carried a heavy drawl, reminding her of Justin's way of speaking. The missus and me. The passenger window came down and a lovely young woman with glistening red hair poked her head through the opening. I'm Gladys, she said with the same drawl, only softer. Please no jokes about my name. My mother seemed to think it amusing to slap an ancient-style name on me. Naomi's brows rose, and she shook her head. Gladys is a fine name. How odd for someone to jump right into such talk after introducing themselves. Naomi would have thought such comments would be reserved for dear friends. So, you know Justin Moore? The man asked, coming around his car. At the mention of Justin's name, Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Justin had told her that he would send guests her way, but she never truly expected it. She thought he was being kind, trying to encourage her. And after their parting of ways, she assumed he would put her out of his mind forever. Ja, she murmured. I know Justin Moore. He can't stop raving about your place, Gladys said. Her eyes roamed the area. It is lovely here. He certainly got that right. She opened her door and stepped out. Her long tanned legs were thin, and she had on a pair of orange slip-on shoes. She wore a snug short dress with geometric shapes printed all over it. She tossed her fiery hair back over her shoulders and gave a contented sigh. I'm simply going to love it here, she said. Please tell us you have a vacancy. Naomi nodded. Ja, we have a vacancy. 2 nights, did you say? The man offered her his hand, and she shook it. Would she ever get used to touching strangers? I'm Scott, he said. Is it true that you have no electricity? Ja, that's true. Do you still want to stay? Gladys laughed, a joyous tinkling sound. It will do us good to unplug, she said, nudging Scott. Won't it, honey? If you say so. He smiled at Naomi. No, she's right. We've been working way too hard. Both of us. This will do us good. If you'd like to get your bags, I'll show you to your room. Will we stay in the same little house where Justin stayed? He said it was the coziest place he's ever slept in. Naomi's heart warmed. Ja. The same place. When they entered the Dotty house, Gladys threw out her arms and practically squealed. Yes. It truly is cozy. Where do we sleep? Taking a breath, Naomi took them to the bedroom she used to share with Isaac. She braced herself for the onslaught of emotions as she offered them her former bed, but when she opened the bedroom door, she felt nothing. She blinked rapidly, and her brow creased. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, waiting. She hadn't opened this door without a rush of grief and longing since the accident had happened that took her husband's life. But right then, she felt as if she were opening any other bedroom door. She was so taken back, she could hardly focus on the matter at hand. Gladys moved past her. This is a charming room, she said. She went to the lantern sitting on a bedside table. Here's our light, honey. Scott joined her. The old-fashioned kind, he said with a chuckle. I'm looking forward to this. Gladys faced Naomi. Do you have hot water for a shower? I should have asked in the beginning. We do, Naomi said, blinking hard and bringing herself back into the moment. Gladys's shoulders relaxed. I hate to be prudish, but I do like a hot shower. Scott rubbed his hands together. Justin told us it was $150 a night because you add in meals. $150? Naomi blanched. Justin knew full well it was only $100 a night. No. It's only. Scott was already peeling 3 $100 bills from his wallet. He handed them to her. This will cover 2 nights. I can get a receipt from you at dinner. Naomi stepped back, but he pressed the money into her palm. But this is too much, she said. Hardly, Scott replied. Not if meals are included. We want to hole up here for the next couple days. Not having to go out for meals is a real plus. Naomi stood dumbfounded. Even when he wasn't around, Justin was making his mark. What time is dinner? Gladys asked. We don't want to be late. 6 o'clock. But really, this is too much money. Nonsense. We'll see you at 6, Scott said, placing their compact suitcase on the end of the bed. Naomi was being dismissed from her own dotty house, which was a switch, but she found she didn't mind. $300. Was this Justin's way of telling her she was charging too little? No, she didn't think so. This was Justin's way of thanking her once again. She held the money to her chest as she went back to the big house, grateful that Justin Moore was still her friend even though she'd never see him again. Thank you, Got, she whispered as she went in to prepare supper. She took the green beans out of the refrigerator and set about snapping them. As she worked, her mind rested on Justin. She realized that thinking of him wasn't painful anymore. There was no yearning, no wishing things could be different. Instead, she felt a contentment at knowing him, a gentle gratitude for their time together. And that was all. Humming now, she set on a pot of water. Beans took quite a bit of boiling to become tender and tasty. Katie wandered into the kitchen an hour before supper was to be served. On my way back from Liz's house, I stopped by the mailbox. You got a letter from Uncle Marvin. Naomi sighed. She already knew what was in the letter. Marvin would be pressuring her once again to move back to Pennsylvania. That was his standard fare. Set it on the counter. I'll get to it later. She handed Naomi the bread knife. Would you cut the loaf and put some slices on a plate? Sure, ma'am. Do we have guests? There's a car out front. And what happened to our sign on the road? Mr. Zach is making us a new sign. And yes, we do have guests. For 2 nights. A nice young couple. Katie grinned. We're doing good, aren't we? We're getting money. Naomi regarded her. I don't want you worrying about money, daughter. Things are fine. Katie's face flushed. I'm not little anymore. Naomi stepped closer. I know that. I heard you talking to Mrs. Mary once. You told her we needed the money. You've said the same thing to Ben and me, too. Naomi blew out her breath. Katie, you leave those concerns to me. The good Lord has taken care of us so far, hasn't he? Katie pressed her lips together and nodded. And he'll continue to take care of us. She squeezed Katie's shoulders. Now, that bread isn't going to slice itself. Katie grinned and started cutting the bread. Supper was ready a few minutes before 6. Ben had skipped in and washed up and was already waiting on the long bench, his legs swinging beneath the heavy table. Naomi and Katie set out the creamed potatoes, green beans, bread, fried chicken, and sliced carrots. This is more like dinner than supper, Katie said. Smells good, Ben exclaimed with an appreciative sniff. They're paying well, Naomi said, so I want to make sure they eat well. Hello. Scott called through the door. Are you ready for us? Naomi went to let them in. Good afternoon. Come straight in. Scott and Gladys entered the dining area and both of them let out an exclamation of pleasure. Oh, this looks wonderful, Gladys said. Please be seated, Naomi said. These are my 2 children, Ben and Katie. She turned to her children. Ben and Katie, this is Mr. Scott and Mrs. Gladys. Ben and Katie nodded and smiled. Scott and Gladys got situated, and Naomi directed them all in a silent prayer of thanks. When she cleared her throat, everyone looked up. Naomi was always surprised when new guests fell so easily into their Amish manner of saying grace. She knew most Englishers said grace out loud, something she'd never done before. Start the creamed potatoes around, would you, Ben? She asked. The meal went well. As it turned out, Scott and Gladys were pleasant conversationalists. Ben had quite a time sharing his knowledge of frogs, once Scott caught on about how important frogs were to the lad. When everyone was finished eating, her guests went straight back to the Dotty house, and she sent Katie and Ben outside for a bit of playtime before bed. She yearned for the quiet of her kitchen to read everything up for the morning and to read Marvin's letter. After the last dish was put away, and the breakfast meal was planned, she took the letter from the counter and sat down in the kitchen rocker to read it. Dear Naomi, I hope this finds you well. I'm going to come right to the point. As you know, I've never approved of you staying in Indiana after the accident. You belong back here with your family. I don't think it's right that you are depriving your 2 children of their kin. Naomi dropped the letter in her lap and looked out the kitchen window. She shouldn't get so upset at her brother's words, she'd read them often enough. How she wished he would stop pressuring her. Didn't he know that she was trying to do the right thing for her children? Didn't he know that she didn't want to upset them with another huge change in their lives? She grabbed up the letter again, and her teeth clenched. I've decided to come out to fetch you myself, Naomi. By the time you get this letter, I'll be on my way. I felt that I should at least give you a warning that I'm coming. A warning? Even he phrased it as a warning. She shook her head. Nothing good was going to come from this, she could feel it in her bones. The rest of the family is in agreement. So, I shall see you soon. Your brother, Marvin. Naomi stuffed the letter back in the envelope and stood up. She looked about her, wondering what she could do. Marvin coming there? And he didn't know about the bed and breakfast. She was sure he wouldn't like it one bit. He wouldn't approve of her running any type of business. She tossed the envelope back on the counter and rushed out the side door. Once outside, she stood, looking restlessly about her. Perhaps a short walk to the fields would help ease her frustration. She certainly couldn't let the children see her upset. She strode across the yard and around back of the barn. She went to the edge of the field and stopped, gazing out upon all of Zachariah's hard work. The corn had grown taller even in those last few days. Soon, it would be harvest time. And then the fields would be put to bed, and there would be no need for Zachariah to come around every day. Naomi? She whirled to face Zach. Oh, I didn't hear you. She licked her lips and smoothed down her apron. What's wrong? She shook her head. Wrong? Nothing's wrong. He put down the hoe he was carrying and stepped closer. What's wrong? He repeated. She turned back toward the field and watched the corn sway ever so slightly in the breeze. Dusk was creeping over the land, and she heard Ben and Katie hollering and laughing back by the tire swing. Zach stood close and gazed out over the fields with her. The fields are beautiful, she murmured. Nearly ready for harvest. It'll be a while yet, Zach said, his quiet tone matching hers. I love this time in the season. Things are ripening and growing fat with the summer sun. She nodded, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. Such poetic words, and she had never, even for a second, considered Zach a poetic man. Naomi, he said, turning to her. What's wrong? Her shoulders slumped. I've heard from my brother. Jaw. He's coming. She closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. But that's right nice for you, isn't it? And for Ben and Katie? No. His brow furrowed. Why not? He wants us to move back to Pennsylvania. He's been after me about it since the accident. Zach inhaled sharply, and Naomi felt him go stiff beside her. To Pennsylvania? She nodded. Standing there, on the land that her father and husband had so desired, had worked so hard to acquire, made Naomi realize how much she wanted to stay. How could she desert their dream? How could she leave Isaac, whose body lay in the cemetery not so far down the road? And how could she leave her mother and father, who lay in that same cemetery? No, her life was there, in Hollybrook. Tears blurred her vision, and she made no move to stop them from falling. "Do you want to go back?" Zach asked. "This is my home." Zach turned and squarely faced her. She looked into his eyes, and even in the growing dusk, she could see how his gaze burned into hers. "You didn't answer," he said. "Do you want to go?" She shook her head. "No. I want to stay." He raised his hand and touched her arm, and it was as if her skin came alive beneath his fingers. Electricity raced up her spine, and she barely stopped herself from jerking back with surprise. She looked down at his hand, his muscled, rough hand that worked from sunup to sundown. The tension between them thickened, and she swallowed and wondered what he could be thinking. And then he took his hand from her and lowered it to his side. "When's he coming?" She shook her head and looked up at him. "I don't know. It could be any day." He nodded. "I'll be here, out in the fields. If you need me." She blinked rapidly and pinched her lips together. A yearning pressed into her chest, and she fought the urge to walk into his arms. Stunned and more than a little disturbed by her emotions, she stepped back. "Jaw." "Out in the fields," she murmured. His gaze lingered on her for another long moment, and then he turned and left. He walked slowly away, his movements stiff and awkward, as if he didn't want to go. Chapter 3. "Uncle Marvin!" Ben hollered and threw open the front door. He rushed down the steps and nearly leapt into Marvin's arms. Marvin stood outside the white van and grinned. He picked Ben up and gave him a huge bear hug. "Little man, you're growing up right fine." Naomi stood at the top of the porch and watched them. Marvin hadn't changed in the year or so that she hadn't seen him. He was still lanky, and the corners of his brown eyes crinkled into a fistful of wrinkles. His dark beard, streaked with a bit of gray, was perhaps longer. He never saw the point of trimming it and just let it flow with its jagged length. Marvin put Ben down and tousled his hair. Then he looked up at Naomi and gave her a smile. Naomi thought she sensed hesitation there, before he strode up the steps to greet her. "Sister, it's good to see you." He put his arm around her shoulders and gave her a quick squeeze. "Where's Katie?" Naomi craned her neck to gaze around toward the side of the house. She was in the Dottie house doing some cleaning. She looked at Ben. "Ben, go fetch your sister." Ben ran off, and Naomi led Marvin inside. "Can I get you something? Are you hungry?" He set down his suitcase and regarded her. "No. The driver stopped a couple hours back, and we ate at a restaurant. I'm fine." Naomi ran her hands over her dress and inhaled deeply. "Why not come into the front room then and have a seat?" Marvin stretched a bit, his long arms reaching toward the ceiling. "I've been sitting for what seems like a week in that van. Could do with a bit of a walk. I'd like to see the place." "Of course," Naomi said. Her heart was fluttering as she fought down her nervousness. She was being silly, it was only her brother, after all. "Shall we go back outside?" "Uncle Marvin," Katie said. "You're here." Marvin opened his arms to her, and she rushed forward to give him a hug. "You've grown." He put his hands on her shoulders and looked her up and down. "One day soon you'll be married with your own kinner." Katie blushed. "I'm not yet 12, you know." Marvin laughed. "Still. You're getting mighty big." "We're going to show Marvin the farm," Naomi said. She stepped outside and started toward the barn, and the three of them followed her. "So, you were cleaning the Dottie house?" Marvin asked. "Ja, our last guests left this morning," Katie said. Naomi stiffened. She hadn't yet had time to tell Marvin about the bed and breakfast. Her jaw tightened. Truth be told, she could have written Marvin and the family and shared that news many times, but she'd always chosen to conveniently forget about it. She regretted that decision now. Guests. They were in the barn now, and Naomi nearly choked when she saw the old Byler's bed and breakfast sign tossed to the side of the barn. Marvin must have noticed it at the exact same moment. "What's this?" he asked, staring back at Naomi. "We got a bed and breakfast," Ben chimed in. "That's how we met Mr. Justin. He was our first guest. He's nice. And the last two people were nice, too. 'Cept we hardly saw 'em. Only when it was time to eat." Marvin bent down and picked up the crude sign. He turned to Naomi and stared holes through her. "Children," Naomi said, averting her gaze. "Why don't you take Marvin's suitcase up to the spare room? Katie, you can start on supper." "But, ma'am, he just got here," complained Bed. "I ain't even showed him where Mr. Zack and I find frogs." "There'll be plenty of time for that," Naomi said. "Now, off with you." Katie pulled on Ben's arm and the two of them hurried off, leaving an expanse of awkward silence behind them. Naomi braced herself for what was to come. "What's this about, Naomi?" "I've started a business," she said, attempting to put on a professional-sounding tone. "I gathered that," he said. His brown eyes grew dark, and he narrowed them to a near squint. "Why?" "Because I need the money." Naomi raised her chin. "And before you get all upset, you should know the bishop has approved of it. I've spoken with him, and he is in favor." The words raced from her mouth as she tried to cut off his objections before they began, but it didn't work. "This farm needs to be sold. You need to come home." She stiffened. "No. This is where I live now. This is where Ma'am and Dad are buried. My husband is buried here. I can't leave." Marvin stepped toward her. "Ruth and I have spoken about it countless times. You belong at home. But this is home. You belong with your family. I've spoken with our bishop and the deacons, too. They agree. Everyone is waiting for your return." His voice grew more insistent with each word. Naomi cringed. She knew he was going to push the issue, again. But she didn't realize he'd start in on her from the very first moment he arrived. "Marvin, I appreciate your concern. Truly, I do." She tried to smile. "But I can't uproot the children again. Naomi, it's hardly uprooting them to bring them back home. Back to their family." She shook her head. "Dad's gone and so is your husband. So, it falls to me to make this decision. I'm your elder brother. You know how this works." She stepped back, wanting to run away and hide while she still could. "Don't look so upset," he said. "This is for your good. This is for your children. They need to be raised with family." "I'm their family," she said, but even she knew how ridiculous that argument was. "And you'll still be with them." His brow furrowed. "Don't fight me on this, Naomi. We all love you and want you to return." Panic rumbled through her stomach. He had all the proper arguments on his side. She didn't have anything else to say. Her fists tightened at her sides. She couldn't leave Hollybrook. She just couldn't. She'd grown to love the farm. Besides, she had a business now. She couldn't simply desert it. She looked around the barn as if searching for an escape. Her eyes settled on the hoe that Zach often carried around as he puttered in her garden when he thought she didn't notice. Zach. Could she leave Zach? Could she? Naomi, I plan to take you and the children with me when I leave. She tried to interrupt him, but he held up his hand. It's settled. I've arranged for a van to pick us up in a week. That'll give us time to pack things up and list the farm to sell. Naomi's head spun, and she grabbed the doorframe of the barn and held on. She couldn't fathom another change so soon. She couldn't fathom her life being ripped from her again. No. She wouldn't do it. Strength and stubbornness flowed through her, and she drew herself up to her full height. Marvin, I won't do it. I won't. His jaw clenched, and his face grew red. It ain't open to discussion, Naomi. I've said my piece, and that's the way it's going to be. I'll speak with the local bishop if you wish. He'll side with me. Naomi's bravado was short-lived. He was right. The bishop would side with Marvin. Perhaps some of the freer-thinking bishops might disagree, but from what she knew of Bishop Schrock, he wasn't one of them. He'd see Marvin as her authority since both her father and her husband were dead. She turned on her heel and marched back to the house. She couldn't bear the thought of telling Katie and Ben. Couldn't bear it. Her eyes welled with tears, and she fought the nausea that rose in her throat. A movement to her right caught her attention. She saw Ben running out in the field toward Zachariah, no doubt to tell him that his uncle had arrived. Ben had grown fond of Zach. More than fond by the looks of things. Her son would be upset to have to leave him. Maybe Katie would be, too. Though she could be as sour as a hen in a rainstorm, Naomi had seen flickers of affection in Katie's eyes for Zach. She hurried up the porch steps and yanked open the screen. She went into the kitchen to help Katie work on supper. The girl looked up when Naomi entered the room. "Where's Uncle?" she asked. "I left him in the barn." Naomi hauled out the big roasting pan from its place on the lower shelf. She plunked it on the counter. "Get the chicken out of the freezer." "But ma'am, it'll never thaw in time." Naomi stared at Katie. "Get the chicken out of the freezer." Katie's eyes grew wide at Naomi's curt tone. Without a word, she opened the freezer door and took out the freshly killed and plucked chicken that hadn't been in the freezer more than 4 days. She carried it to the sink and placed it there. She turned to her mother. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Naomi snapped. "Not a thing. Isn't it nice that Marvin is here to visit?" She couldn't keep the sarcasm from her voice, and she was ashamed. She wasn't acting in a seemly manner at all. And it wasn't fair of her to burden Katie with her problems. Katie was only a child, after all. There had to be some way out of this. Some way. She sank to a kitchen chair, twisting a dish towel in her hands. She could go to Bishop Schrock herself and plead her case. Marvin would have to back down if the bishop gave an opposite decree. Wouldn't he? Naomi knew her brother well. Flexibility wasn't part of his character. Even if Bishop Schrock sided with her, Marvin might still insist she leave. But he could hardly pull her kicking and screaming into the van, could he? Shame burned through Naomi. What was she thinking? God would be displeased with her behavior and her thoughts. A woman was to be submissive. Didn't hundreds of sermons teach her so? She felt her cheeks go hot. What kind of example would she be setting for Katie if she acted with such rebellion? Why, that was how Englishers acted, wasn't it? The ticking of the large round clock over the window reverberated through the kitchen. Naomi saw Katie's lower lip quiver as she turned away and put her attention on unwrapping the chicken. Naomi reached over and took her hand. "Oh, I'm sorry, Katie. Forgive my temper." Everything's all right. Her voice was soft and crooning. Katie's shoulders relaxed, and she stepped close to lean into Naomi's side. It's okay, ma'am. Shall we make a special supper for your uncle? I happen to know that shoofly pie is his favorite. Katie's expression perked up. I'll make the pie. Can I? Naomi chuckled. Why do you think I mentioned it, Katie? You make the best pies in the district. Marvin and Ben came in just before Naomi and Katie set the food on the table. Supper was often a lighter meal in the evening, but that day Naomi and Katie had pulled out all the stops. They served roasted chicken, new potatoes and gravy, green beans, thick slices of homemade bread, and pickles. The crowning glory, of course, was Katie's shoofly pie. After the meal was eaten, Marvin leaned back in the chair and patted his belly. I'd say that was as good as Ruth's cooking. He gave Katie a wink. And the best pie I've ever tasted. Katie blushed and looked at Naomi. Marvin, this girl bakes circles around me, Naomi said. She reached over and gave Katie's hand a squeeze. We should have had Mr. Zach for dinner, too, Ben said. Jaw. About this Zachariah, Marvin began, he's leasing the land, correct? Naomi nodded. Ben introduced us. Marvin's keen gaze was on her. Does he have interest in buying the farm? Naomi's eyes widened. Katie plunked her glass back onto the table and the milk inside sloshed dangerously close to the rim. Buying the farm? Katie repeated. Ben frowned. Why would he buy it? It's ours. Why indeed? Naomi said, giving Marvin a warning glance. But Marvin was nonplussed. He picked up his mug and took a sip of coffee. Just wondering, he said. No, he's not interested, Naomi said tersely. You asked him? She bit her lower lip and shook her head. I think that's a mighty good place to start. He set his cup back down. I'm a bit tired from the journey. He looked at both the children. Let's meet in the front room for Bible reading and prayer in a few minutes. Then I plan to turn in. Naomi stood. Katie, shall we clear the table and red up the kitchen? Katie got up and stumbled after her to the kitchen. Ma'am. Naomi's expression was pinched. Let's not worry about anything right now, she said, forcing herself to put a smile on her face. You wash and I'll dry. How does that sound? But ma'am, why would Mr. Zach buy our farm? Naomi poured liquid soap into the sink and started the faucet. It's just an idea your uncle had. Ma'am. Katie put her hands on her hips. I'm not a child. Naomi turned the faucet back off and gazed at her daughter. She studied Katie's indignant look and her proud stance, and alarm coursed through her. Was this the behavior she was instilling in her? This stubborn pride? Was she raising her daughter to be rebellious? She blinked and leaned heavily against the counter. This was no good. No good, at all. If she allowed her daughter to act like this, where would it lead? How would Katie handle Rumspringa when she was given a good deal of freedom? This had to be nipped in the bud. Don't speak to your elders in such a tone, Naomi corrected her. She drew herself into what she hoped was a stance of authority. We're not going to discuss this right now. Katie's mouth tightened, and Naomi saw her work to control her words. Naomi waited, her eyes steady on the girl. Finally, Katie slumped, and her gaze dropped to the floor. I'm sorry, ma'am, she mumbled. Naomi felt a part of her heart break as she drew her daughter into her arms. How she wished Isaac was still there. Raising a daughter alone was no small task, and she had no idea if she was doing it correctly. She didn't even have her own mother to rely on for wisdom and advice. She looked over the top of Katie's head toward the front room where Marvin would be waiting for them with the German Bible open. Maybe he was right. Maybe they should go back to Pennsylvania. She'd have more support there. More help in raising her children. She took a deep breath and pressed her lips together. Maybe Marvin's arrival was in God's timing. Maybe God was providing for her through her brother. Naomi was awake hours before dawn broke. She tossed restlessly in her bed, attempting to talk herself into moving back to Pennsylvania. Her mind flitted through the reasons, and there were plenty. Truth be told, when she got down to it, there were few reasons to remain in Hollybrook. Very few. Her husband and parents were gone. They wouldn't care if she stuck it out in Indiana just because it had been their dream. Isaac would want her to be where it was best for the children. And for her. So, was Pennsylvania the best for them? She had wept when they'd left, sorry to say goodbye to all her family and friends there. But when they'd arrived to the Hollybrook farm and had moved all their things in, and when she'd seen the complete joy and satisfaction on her husband's face, all her weeping stopped. She'd thrown herself into their new district. She'd made a good friend in Mary. She'd watched her children thrive. It had been good. So good. Until the accident. Naomi clutched her hands to her chest. Isaac was torn from her in an instant, and her parents were no more. All the children had left was her. And the farm. Naomi threw the quilt back and rose from her bed. She padded over to the open window and gazed out on the land. She inhaled the sweet smell of growing plants and the aroma of the blossoms bordering the walkway. In the growing light, she watched the leaves on the elm tree dance gently in the morning air. A rooster crowed the day's beginnings. How could she leave such a beautiful place? She looked to the left where, if she positioned herself just right, she could observe the barn door. It was open. Zach must be there. She watched, waiting to see his solid form as he went out to the fields. She didn't have to wait long. He paused at the door of the barn and looked toward the house. She ducked back behind the curtains but kept her eyes on him. Even through the shadows, she knew he was watching her window. He wouldn't be able to see her though, it wasn't light enough, and she was mostly hidden. She would miss him. Tears stung the back of her eyelids, and she knew at that moment that she'd made her decision. She would take the children and go back with Marvin. It was the only sensible thing to do. She wouldn't have to struggle to make ends meet. She wouldn't have to raise her children alone. They would be surrounded by family, by people who loved them. Zach lowered his head and turned toward the field. For a moment the day before, she had thought Zach had feelings for her. She'd thought he had been upset when she mentioned Marvin's arrival and the reason for his visit. But he hadn't said anything. Hadn't declared any intentions towards her. She'd hoped he would have. She sucked in her breath. So she did have feelings for him? Her heart squeezed beneath her ribs. What difference did it make? He obviously wasn't going to pursue anything with her. She fingered the curtains at the window and took slow, even breaths. Yes, she would miss him. She would miss his eyes on her. She would miss his steady presence in her life. She would miss hearing the sound of his laughter when he was with Ben out in the barn. She turned away from the window. Was she destined to miss people her entire life? Was that what her lot was to be? She would never stop missing Isaac. Never. She accepted that. Nor would she ever stop missing her parents. But missing Zach? That didn't seem necessary. With a sigh, she dressed for the day. She'd break the news to the children after breakfast. Dear God, please, please, let it go well. When the children had run off to do their before-breakfast chores, Marvin took Naomi aside. Well, sister? Are you ready to start packing? Naomi swallowed past the growing knot in her throat. I need to talk to the children first. You can give me that much time, can't you? Her voice was short-tempered, and she immediately apologized. Oh, I'm sorry, Marvin. I didn't get much sleep. He nodded and tugged on the end of his scraggly beard. Understandable. I thought I'd approach Zachariah about purchasing the farm. No. Naomi interjected. Please let me do it. I will do it for you. No. I've been handling all the business up till now. Let me do this. She felt her cheeks go hot. She was disgusted with herself, for she well knew the reason she wanted to be the one to approach Zach. She wanted to watch his face, hear his tone of voice. She wanted to discern whether there was any emotion there for her. Of anyone in the district, it would be most fitting if Zach bought the farm. He knew it better than anyone. Better than she did. Better even than her husband and her parents. He'd worked the land longer. All right, Naomi. But I'm right here to finish up the business. Jaw. Thank you. She turned to put breakfast on the table. The children would be back any minute, and she didn't want to put off the inevitable for a moment longer than necessary. Perhaps, when everyone knew, she could adjust to the idea with more grace and eagerness herself. Because right then, all she felt was dread. The children bounded in the side door, washed up, and took their seats at the table. This time, Marvin led the silent grace. Chapter 4. After eating, Katie stood to begin clearing the table. Wait a moment, Katie, Naomi said, reaching out and touching her arm. I want to talk with both you children. Marvin rose. I'll leave you to it, he said. I'll be out on the porch should you need me. Both Ben's and Katie's face reflected their curiosity. What's going on? Katie asked, hesitation in her tone. Naomi licked her lips. Children, Marvin didn't only come to visit us, she began. He and the rest of the family, she looked at her children and gave them a smile, albeit somewhat forced. You remember all your aunts and uncles and cousins. Well, they are really missing us. They should 'a' come with Uncle then, Ben said with a big grin. I could 'a' showed 'em all my frogs and stuff. It would have been too difficult and expensive for all of them to make the trip. So they sent Marvin as a kind of representative. Katie frowned. Representative? I don't understand. The family wants us to move back to Pennsylvania. Naomi held her breath, bracing herself for their reaction. To her surprise, they said nothing. They both simply stared at her, their mouths open. Did you hear me? She asked. But we live here now, Ben said, scratching his arm. What about Liz? Katie asked, her mind immediately going to her best friend. I wouldn't ever get to see her anymore. Naomi cleared her throat. You can write each other. Wouldn't it be fun to get letters all the time? I know how excited you are when we hear from our family in Pennsylvania. Letters? Katie asked, her voice rising. You can't play with letters. Naomi sighed and clasped her hands firmly in her lap. No. You can't. She gave Katie a sympathetic look. But Marvin and the family think it's for the best. You'll have all your cousins and your aunts and uncles. And remember your old friends? They're still there. What about Mr. Zach? Ben asked. Is he gonna come with us? Don't be stupid, Katie snapped. Katie Byler? That's enough of that, Naomi scolded. She looked at Ben. No, son. Mr. King's family is here. He won't be coming with us. Ben's wide eyes welled with tears. But who's gonna play with me? Who's gonna teach me stuff? Naomi felt as if she'd been slapped. She gulped air and composed her face. Your uncles, Ben. And your cousins. They love you and are eager to be with you. Katie's lower lip quivered, and she reached across the table and touched Ben's arm. I'll teach you stuff, she said, and her voice cracked. Naomi was startled by her daughter's tender gesture. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Can I be excused now? Katie asked. Her voice was wooden. She leveled a shadowed look at her mother, her demeanor resigned. Jaw. I don't want to go, Ben said, his tears starting to fall. Does Mr. Zach know? He never told me. No. He doesn't know. I'm going to tell him in a few minutes. I don't want to go. I like it here. Naomi blew out her breath. So do I, Ben. But we like Pennsylvania, too. Everything's going to be all right. You'll see. Ben wiped at the tears on his cheeks. I don't want to go, he repeated and dropped his head on his arms. Naomi stood and kissed the top of his head. Right now, why don't you go out to Marvin on the porch? He'd love to visit with you a bit. Ben climbed off the long bench and shuffled over to the front door. Naomi wanted to call him back and tell him that they weren't going after all. She wanted to laugh and tell him it wasn't true, that they were staying in Hollybrook. Instead, she squared her shoulders and went into the washroom and through the side door. Outside, she shaded her eyes with her hand, scanning the fields. And then she saw him. He was in the far corner of the field. She took off toward him, her heart squeezing painfully with each step. Naomi! Zach cried when he saw her approaching. What's wrong? She never walked out to the fields to find him, so it only made sense that he would be alarmed. Are the Kinner all right? He strode towards her. She held up her hand. They're fine, Zach. He stopped before her, and his brows were drawn with concern. Your brother? He's all right. She nodded, a lump growing in her throat. He's fine. Then what is it? Do you want to buy the farm? She blurted. He gaped at her and took a half step back. What? Do you want to buy the farm? She repeated, blinking rapidly, trying to keep the impending tears from falling. You're selling it, he said, his eyes searching hers. She nodded. He took off his straw hat and held it, his fingers circling the brim. I don't understand. We're going back to Pennsylvania with Marvin. She watched him, hoping, no praying, that he would say something, anything, to make her stay. I see. Her heart sank, and she swallowed hard. He licked his lips. What about your bed and breakfast? She shrugged. It will close, I guess. It won't matter that much. I only barely got started with it. But I thought you liked it. I do. He put his hat back on, pushing it down on his head. The brim shadowed his face, and she wanted to step closer to look into his eyes, but she didn't dare. You didn't answer me, she said. About buying the farm, I mean. He exhaled. Naomi, I don't have that kind of money right now. How do you know? I haven't told you what it costs. I won't cheat you. I only need to get out from under the debt. She was talking fast, realizing she knew next to nothing about selling land. He stepped closer. She could see his eyes now, and they looked dark and angry. I would never think you'd cheat me, he said, his voice clipped. How could you believe so little of me? She blanched. What? She didn't believe little of him. Why was he so angry? She'd only been explaining that the price wouldn't be inflated. I am sorry, Mr. King. She stared at him. Mr. King. He turned to the side and spit on the ground. Instinctively, she backed up, confused by his behavior. He was hotly angry now, and she wasn't sure why. "My brother will talk to you about it then," she finally said. He glared at her and turned on his heel and walked away. She shook her head. What had just happened? He stopped and turned back to her. "When are you leaving?" he asked, over-enunciating every word. "A week." He hit his hand on his thigh. "Of course." She turned and fled, running through the field, brushing against the corn and feeling it tug at her dress. What was the matter with him? She'd thought that he would at least voice a bit of sorrow at her leaving. As she ran, her mouth tightened. He was crazy, that man. And heartless. She wanted to turn and yell good riddance at him, but she wouldn't be so crude. When she rounded the corner of the big house, she stopped short. A blue car with rust running around the bottom of the doors was parked before the porch. A woman with 2 young children stood on the first step. Marvin was talking to her. "Hello?" Naomi said, approaching the woman. She turned and Naomi gave a start at how beautiful she was. Liquid blue eyes sparkled, and her left cheek dimpled with an eager smile. "They told me at the feed and supply that you have a bed and breakfast. I'm looking for a place to stay for a few nights." Marvin caught Naomi's eye. "I told her that you're closed for business." Naomi bristled. She had 1 more week. She didn't need to close yet. She gave her brother a look of apology and turned to the woman. "My brother's right. We'll be closing soon. But I do believe that we can help you for a couple nights at least." She heard her brother sputter, but she kept her eyes on the woman, who broke out into an even greater smile at her words. "That's wonderful. And don't worry. My children behave well. This here is Daisy, and that's John." Naomi laughed. "I never gave it a thought. Nice to meet you, children. Come. You can stay in the Dottie house." "Let's go, kids," the woman said, her voice light and airy. "Let's go to the Dottie house." Something in the way she said Dottie house made Naomi suspect that she was familiar with the term. "So, you know what a Dottie house is?" Naomi asked. The woman's face flushed. Yes. Yes, I do." But she didn't say anything further, and Naomi didn't want to pry. She opened the door to the small house and ushered the woman and her children inside. "You can sleep in the main bedroom, and your children can each have a single bed in here." Naomi noted that Katie had done a fine job of cleaning the day before. It looked nice and tidy. "If you'd like to take meals with us, we'll eat dinner at noon and supper at 6 o'clock. "That would be right nice," the woman said. "When would you like me to pay?" "You can pay now or when you leave." Naomi told her the price, and the woman nodded. "I should get your name," Naomi added. The woman faced her, and a look of dread flashed over her face so quickly Naomi wasn't sure she'd seen it. "The name is Marcy," she said, her voice dipping. "Marcy Blankenship." Naomi almost choked. Marcy Blankenship? Wasn't that the name of Zach's old girlfriend? She stared at the woman in shock and then quickly worked to recover her senses. Hello Marcy. I'm Naomi." No wonder the woman knew what a Dottie house was. She'd been Amish. "Nice to meet you, Naomi." "I'll leave you to get settled," Naomi said, grateful that her voice sounded normal. "Let me know if you need anything." "We will." Naomi stumbled out of the house. Did Zach know Marcy was coming? And did he know that she would be staying there with her? Naomi shuddered and wondered what it all meant. But she knew before anything else, she'd have to go and deal with her brother's anger. He wouldn't take kindly to her countering his wishes in public like that. And she was right. He stood on the porch waiting for her, and his angry scowl was one she remembered well from childhood. "Naomi." She rushed up the steps. "Before you get mad at me, let me speak. I know you don't want me to take guests, but they'll be my last ones. I like the bed and breakfast. I'm going to miss it when we leave. So can't you at least let me have these last 2 nights? And besides, we can use the money to help pay for gas for the trip back to Pennsylvania." She spoke quickly and with passion, trying to ignore the confusion that thundered through her regarding the identity of her guest. Hadn't Marcy used her maiden surname? Wouldn't that mean she had never married, even though she had 2 children? What was Zach going to do? Marvin looked at her, and much to Naomi's surprise, his expression softened. "All right, Naomi. I understand what you're saying. Have your 3 guests. But remember, you have to be ready in a week to leave. How can I take everything with me in a week? And in a van, no less? The way I see it, all we can really take is our clothes and perhaps a few things we hold dear. But I won't leave the quilts behind. Nor Ma'am's favorite dishes." He touched her shoulder. "I can arrange for a truck to bring the furniture at a later date." Naomi shook her head. "No." "What do you mean?" "I assume we'll live in someone's dotty house, right? And they'll already have it furnished. We might as well leave most everything here." Grief tore up her throat then, and she couldn't stand there pretending to be fine for another minute. She rushed into the house and up to her room, where she fell on her bed and sobbed. Sobbed for another tearing loss in her life. Sobbed for her children. Sobbed for her dead husband and parents. Sobbed for her growing affection for Zach that was never to be. Chapter 5. Marcy and her 2 children spent part of the afternoon lollygagging about on the front porch. Naomi could hardly take her eyes from them, especially Marcy. She studied her, wanting to know the draw she had on Zachariah. There were her looks, of course, but Naomi instinctively knew that looks alone wouldn't be enough for Zach. There had to be something in Marcy's personality that had dazzled him. Zach hadn't come in from the fields yet, and she wondered whether she should go out and warn him. Unless he already knew, of course. But surely, he would have told her if he'd known Marcy was coming. Naomi stepped back from the window, embarrassed to be spending so much time spying on a guest. The house was quiet. She had no idea where Marvin was, and Ben had holed himself up in his room and wouldn't come out. Katie had run off to Liz's house, no doubt to share her upsetting news regarding the move. She leaned her hands on the kitchen counter and closed her eyes. Zach would want to know. As a friend, she needed to tell him. Part of her wanted to, for she wanted to note his reaction. Another part of her was afraid to tell him. And for the same reason. What if he became full of glee at the news? What then? Of course, it didn't matter. She was leaving. She wiped her damp hands on a dish towel and slipped out the side door to go out to the fields. She hoped Marvin wasn't around to observe her. She knew he wouldn't approve of her traipsing off to talk to Zach. Well, she was going to do it. She owed Zach as much. Zach was in the middle of the fields, pulling back a tassel to inspect the cob beneath when she approached. "Naomi?" Again. He dropped his hands and beheld her. "What is it this time?" There was an edge to his voice, and she stiffened. "I want to tell you something." "Jaw?" "What is it?" "Marcy's here." The 2 words might as well have been well-aimed arrows for the effect they had on Zach. He flinched, and his face went white. He stepped back, nearly trampling on the corn stalks. "What?" "She's here. Staying at my bed and breakfast." "What?" His voice was frantic, and he shook his head as if trying to wrap his mind around her news. She's here with her 2 children. I don't know why. I imagine she's looking for you. He gaped at her, and she saw his jaw clench. She continued. She doesn't have any family around here anymore, does she? He shook his head, and she saw him swallow hard. Did she ask for me? The words scraped up his throat. No. He looked over the tops of the corn toward the house. Naomi followed his gaze, although she wasn't tall enough to see the house clearly. With stiff movements, he went back to pulling back random tassels. You're not going to go see her? Naomi asked, incredulous. He ignored her, continuing about his business. To a casual observer, it might look like nothing was amiss. But Naomi knew better. His face was set, harder than usual. And his hands shook ever so slightly. He was disturbed. Deeply disturbed. Zach, she whispered. Again, he ignored her. She sighed heavily and turned to go. Without looking back, she knew his eyes were on her, watching her every move as she left the field to go back to the house. Approaching Marcy on the front porch, she smiled. Would you like some cool lemonade? That'd be right nice, Marcy said, tossing her shiny brown hair over her shoulder. Good. Children, I'll get each of you a glass, too. The 2 children, both as attractive as their mother, grinned. And after your drink, you can play in the tire swing if you like. Can we, Mom? Asked Daisy, her eyes dancing. Of course, Marcy agreed. Naomi went inside and poured lemonade into 4 glasses. She decided that she'd sit a spell with Marcy, get to know her a bit. Going back outside, she served the 3 of them and then took a glass for herself, sitting in a free rocker. The 2 children gulped down their drinks and raced off toward the tire swing. Naomi smiled at Marcy. I hope you enjoy your stay in Hollybrook, she said. Marcy put both hands around her glass, as if absorbing its coolness. I'm sure we will. I've been here before, you know. Oh. You're new, aren't you? I've been here over a year. I used to live in Hollybrook myself. Marcy blinked, and her smile was sad. I was a right mess. We had to leave sudden-like. She gazed out at the yard, her eyes lost in her memories. I made the biggest mistakes of my life here. She gave a quick laugh. Oh, most folks would say that having my children was my biggest mistake. Or my biggest sin. But look at them. She glanced over her shoulder toward the playing children. They're beautiful. There's something I did right. Naomi was shocked that this woman would talk so freely to her. They didn't know each other. I was engaged once. I let him go. Naomi stiffened. She wondered how anyone could let Zachariah King go. He was such a fine man, and she knew he had been equally as fine all those years ago. Men like Zachariah didn't change. They remained steadfast and true. Perhaps you know him, Marcy said, her expression eager. Zach King. Naomi inhaled deeply. Mr. King leases my land. Marcy gave such a start, she nearly dropped her glass. The lemonade sloshed and some dribbled down the side of the glass. What? He's in the fields right now. Naomi wondered whether she should have divulged such information, but she could hardly stay quiet about it, could she? That would look like she was hiding something. Zachariah? Marcy said with a gasp. He's here? Right now. Naomi nodded, and her stomach felt as if a crate of cement blocks had been placed on it. There was no mistaking the look of love and joy on Marcy's face. Marcy set down her glass and jolted up from her chair. Where? Naomi rose and gestured for Marcy to follow her. She led her to the edge of the field and pointed. Marcy gave Naomi's arm a quick squeeze and ran off through the fields. Naomi couldn't bear to watch her. She turned and moved back to the porch, just in time to see her friend Mary come up the drive in her pony cart. "Naomi," she cried as she neared her. "Naomi!" Naomi raised her hand in greeting and worked to keep her tears from falling. "Hello, Mary." Mary reined in her horse and climbed out of the cart. "What's this I hear?" Naomi looked into the dear face of her friend and burst into tears. Chapter 6. "Oh. Naomi. So, it's true. You are leaving." She grabbed Naomi's arm and led her up the stairs to the porch. "Sit down. Tell me." Naomi sank into a rocker and buried her face in her hands. Everything was wrong. She'd thought that nothing could ever happen that was worse than the accident. In that, she'd been right. But she'd never thought that horrible things would continue to happen to her, continue to darken her path. Just when she'd gathered hope that maybe life could be good again, Marvin had to come and dash all her dreams. And now, Marcy's presence was killing any hope she had with Zach. The hard truth was that Naomi would never be able to see anything through at the farm. She'd never be able to see if there could be a good life for her there in Hollybrook. And she would lose Zach. And her friend, Mary. Mary crooned over her, patting her back. "Tell me about it. You're really leaving then? My Jack said he met your brother at the feed and supply. They got to talking, and your brother said you're going back to Pennsylvania." "Why, Naomi? I thought you liked it here." "I do," Naomi cried. "I don't want to go." She wiped her tears and looked up at Mary. "Marvin is insisting. And he's right, you know. Back in Pennsylvania, I'd have help with the children. I wouldn't have to worry about making money every minute of the day." Mary grimaced and plopped into the rocker beside Naomi. "What's changed? It's been this way since your husband died. What's changed now?" Naomi pressed her lips together, not wanting to consider Mary's question, because nothing had really changed. She was still tired. She was still weary of worrying about money. But she had the bed and breakfast now. And she had Zach. She gave a sharp intake of breath. No, she didn't. She didn't have Zach at all. Marcy did. Mary looked at the car in the drive. "You have guests?" Marcy Blankenship and her 2 kids. Mary's mouth dropped open, and she grabbed Naomi's shoulder. "Marcy? She's here." Naomi nodded miserably. "She's in the fields with Zach." "What?" "She went racing out there as soon as I told her where he was." "No." Mary's eyes stretched wide, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "He didn't know she was coming. But when I told him she was here, I saw his reaction. He's not over her, Mary." Mary studied her face. "And that bothers you?" Naomi looked away and didn't answer. "Naomi," Mary said. "Look at me." With reluctance, Naomi turned back to her friend. "You love him." Did she? Did she love him? It didn't matter. "He doesn't love me." Naomi wanted to sink into the earth and disappear forever. She chided herself. What a ridiculous thing to wish for. She was a mother, after all, and she had wonderful people in her life. "Forgive me, dear Father in heaven. Naomi Byler, haven't I been telling you for weeks that Zach has feelings for you? Haven't I? I've known that man since we were both knee-high to a grasshopper. He has feelings for you, for sure and for certain." Naomi shook her head over and over. Mary put her hand on Naomi's lap. He's shy is all. Doesn't matter anymore, anyway. Naomi blinked away her tears. Marcy's here now. Mary twisted around. Those her kids? Jaw. They're lovely, aren't they? Mary shrugged. So are yours. Oh, Mary. This isn't a competition. And if it was, Marcy would be the victor. Who knows what's going on right now in the field? Pretty brazen for her to rush off like that, chasing a man. Naomi's cheeks went hot. Hadn't she run off to the field to see Zach herself? And more than once. I don't want you to move. Mary puckered her lips into a pout. You've become my closest friend, Naomi Byler. Just riding each other won't be the same. No, it won't. Mary stood up and shook out her apron. Shame on me. The Lord God is in control. It isn't up to us to question his ways. He knows what's what. Naomi smiled. Only Mary would phrase it like that. I'll come again tomorrow, she said crisply. You'll need help with your packing. Thank you, Mary. She waved away Naomi's gratitude. I'll be here after the noon meal. And with that, she climbed back into her pony cart, gave a snap to the reins, and was off. Naomi closed her eyes and breathed in the moist summer air. She would miss her friend. Mary had helped her recover from her grief. Mary had given her moments of laughter when she'd thought she would never laugh again. Mary had made life bearable, and time after time had assured her that all would be well. Daisy ran up the steps of the porch, startling Naomi out of her thoughts. Where's my mom? She asked. She's on a walk in the fields. She'll be back soon, Naomi said. She heard Marcy's voice coming around the corner of the house. And Zach's voice. Naomi shot out of her chair and faced them. Marcy's face was red and glistening with perspiration. Naomi wondered at that, as it wasn't terribly hot. When he saw Naomi, Zach clammed up completely, closing his lips into a tight line. Naomi tried to read the look in his eyes, but all she saw was turmoil. She bit her lip until it throbbed like her pulse. There could be only one reason for such turmoil in Zach's eyes. He still loved Marcy. Her anguish grew until she had to fight to keep her composure. Naomi, I didn't know you were still out here, Marcy said, blinking and wiping the top of her lip. Daisy pulled on her mother's arm. Mom, John and I are hungry. Can we eat some of our snacks? Marcy flinched as if she'd forgotten she even had a daughter. What? Oh. Yes, of course. Go ahead. Come on, John, hollered Daisy. She said yes. The two scampered around to the Dottie house. Zach's face had gone dark, and Naomi could see that she was in the way. I have work to do, she mumbled and fairly ran into the house. The screen slammed behind her, and she shut the door, too, leaning against it and breathing hard. What were they saying out there? Did Marcy want to become Amish again? To ask forgiveness, to obey whatever the bishop decreed, and be welcomed back? And how would Daisy and John like that? Were they willing to embrace their mother's roots? She sank down to the floor and rested her chin on her knees. She closed her eyes. Don't do it, Zach. Don't do it. With a start, she realized what she was chanting, and she shivered. It wasn't her concern. How wrong of her to impose herself into Zach's business. Into God's business. She put her arms around her legs and tried to talk herself into getting up and getting about her work. If they were to move in a few days, she needed to begin packing. Most importantly, she needed to go through all their things, decide what she had room to take and what had to be left. Would Zach buy the farm? He hadn't really responded to her. She hoped he would. He loved the farm. That was evident in the way he cared for it, always puttering around after his work in the fields, fixing things and watching over things that had nothing to do with leasing the land. She rose and couldn't help but glance out her window. Zach and Marcy were standing close, talking, their faces intent, as if no one else in the world existed. Naomi sighed and felt a sense of loss, an emotion that sat on her with unwanted familiarity. She quivered and tried to shrug it off, but it had sunk its fingers into her once again. She squared her shoulders and walked to the kitchen. Ma'am's favorite dishes would have to be packed. They comforted Naomi. Their pattern of small yellow flowers around the edge brought her cheer even on her darkest days. Using them was like having her mother still with her, and she couldn't help but think Ma'am would be pleased. Someday, Naomi would hand the dishes down to Katie, who would use them with equal pleasure. Yes, the dishes had to come. And what about Dad's tools? They should be kept for Ben. Perhaps not all of the tools, for they would fill boxes and boxes. The special tools. Naomi smiled to herself. What made a tool special? Maybe she should let Ben choose. There was a knock at the door, and Naomi's attention was jerked back to Zach and Marcy. She hurried to answer it, wondering which one of them would be there. It was Zach. He gave her a guarded look and for a moment said nothing. "Ja?" Naomi asked, hardly daring to breathe. When he didn't say anything, she grew worried and aggravated. He was the one who knocked on the door. Did he expect her to start the conversation? "Naomi?" He licked his lips. "You all right?" What an absurd question. Of course, she was all right. She frowned and wondered what he was getting at. "Marcy's leaving." "What?" Relief roared through her. "Marcy's leaving." "Why are you the one telling me?" "She asked me to." "So she's not even staying the night?" "No." The relief multiplied and expanded and filled her every cell. If Marcy was leaving, didn't that mean? Zach stepped back from the door and pushed his straw hat back onto his head. He gave her a curt nod and turned away. "Wait," she burst out. He stopped but didn't look back at her. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer. He raised his hand in a backward wave and tromped down the steps and back toward the field. Naomi's eyebrows rose. What had happened between him and Marcy? Within minutes, Daisy and John came around the house, lugging their bags. Daisy dropped hers with a thud and opened the trunk. They both threw their bags inside, but Daisy wasn't tall enough to grab it shut again. Naomi went down the steps toward them. "Need some help?" "I can't reach it." "You just gotta slam it." Naomi easily reached the trunk and slammed it shut. She shook her head, realizing it was the first time in her life that she'd shut the trunk of a car. Whenever she rode in a van, the driver handled such things. Vans didn't have trunks, anyway. Considering the emotion of the moment, Naomi marveled that she could be pondering such mundane things as car trunks. Marcy walked toward the van, and Naomi could see her eyes were red and swollen. Even after a crying jag, the girl looked beautiful. A tinge of jealousy threaded through Naomi. She hurried toward Marcy and took her bag from her. "Let me," she said. Marcy blew out her breath. "I'm sorry for the change of plans." "That's fine. I can pay you for the time we were here." Naomi shook her head. "Don't be silly. It was nothing. Can I get you a snack for your journey? Would the children like some cookies?" John jumped out of the back seat. "Can we, Mom?" Daisy planted herself in the passenger seat in front and folded her arms across her chest. Her lips pressed into a tight pucker, and she didn't look willing to budge. "I suppose so," Marcy said, her voice trailing. Then she looked at John. I'll go get them. You get back in the car. Naomi handed Marcy's bag to John. Then she took Marcy into the house. She heard her sniffing behind her as they entered the kitchen. Naomi got out a paper bag and a couple paper napkins. She lined the sack and then began placing cookies inside. By then, Marcy had begun to weep, and Naomi couldn't simply pretend that she wasn't. She set the sack on the counter and led Marcy to her kitchen bench. Sit down for a minute, she said. Would you like some water? Or tea? Marcy shook her head and put her hands to her face. I'm sorry, she muttered through her fingers. I'm a mess. Naomi sat beside her. Zach said, a fresh bout of tears began. Zach said that Marcy couldn't continue. She merely sobbed into her hands. Naomi waited, feeling awful for her pain. After a minute or two, Marcy got a hold of herself. I'm sorry. She removed her hands from her face. Naomi handed her a napkin, and Marcy dabbed at her eyes and blew her nose. I left the Amish. She gazed at Naomi with wide eyes. Naomi nodded. I know. I don't really regret it. She looked at Naomi as if gauging her reaction. Too many rules for me. No freedom at all. Naomi bristled at her words but chose to let it go. I was a wild teen. Didn't want to listen to anyone. Least of all my parents or the bishop. Heaven forbid that I listened to him. She gave a wry laugh. I was insufferable. Finally, in total humiliation, my parents left the area, and I went with them. Sort of. I ran around a lot. She dropped her hands to her lap and got a faraway look in her eyes. Zach was my beau. He loved me. She glanced at Naomi. He loved me with his whole heart. He tried to talk sense into me, but I wouldn't listen to him either. Even though I knew how much he loved me, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be the proper little Amish girl. I'd tasted my freedom by then, and oh, how sweet it was. Naomi watched the emotions play over her face. She watched her delicate brow furrow, her rosy lips part. She saw Marcy as Zach might have seen her, and she understood his broken heart. Things in my life lately, things have been difficult. Her eyes teared up again. My parents are both gone, and I wanted a family again. She bit her lips. I stupidly thought I might be able to come home to Hollybrook. But I couldn't. I thought that Zach. She stopped abruptly and gasped, grabbing Naomi's hand. Her eyes grew huge as she stared at Naomi. Oh. I'm so blind. She shook her head, and her lips parted. I'm such a fool, sitting here going on and on about Zach and me. I didn't even think. I didn't realize. Naomi felt Marcy's grip on her hand tighten. She wanted to pull away from this beautiful girl. She wasn't accustomed to such familiarity with a stranger. But she didn't know how to extricate herself without causing a scene. Marcy stared at her. It's you, isn't it? Naomi blanched. Me? I'm sorry. I don't know what. He's fallen for you. Naomi did pull her hand away then. She got up and went back to the cookies, putting 2 more into the sack with shaking hands. Your cookies are ready, she said, turning and offering the bag to Marcy. Marcy shook her head. I get it. I was Amish for years. These things aren't spoken about. Well, I'm English now. A fancy girl. So I can speak as I wish. Zach would hardly listen to me. Oh, he stood there all right, and I saw the pain in his eyes. He's still not over me, but he won't take me back. Lord. I was even willing to play Amish with him. She shook her head and reached out to take the bag of cookies. Letting him go is the one regret I have. But at the time, I couldn't have Zach and my new freedom. I tried more than once. You know, coming back, going to Sunday meeting. It about killed me. She got up and stepped close to Naomi, staring deeply into her eyes. You're a good woman. I can see that. I wish you well. Without a further word, she turned on her heel and left, her hips gently swaying in her snug jeans. Naomi watched her go, emotions tumbling through her heart. Despite the girl's frankness, despite her brazenness, Naomi liked her. Marcy Blankenship had an appeal, a careless magnetism that drew a person. Naomi peered through the kitchen window and saw her car disappear down the drive. She wished her well, too. Somehow, she knew Marcy would land on her feet. Chapter 7. If Naomi thought that once Marcy left, Zach would make a move in their relationship, she was dead wrong. During the next day and a half, she didn't see him. She wasn't even sure he came to work in the fields. She was too busy in the house, packing and sorting. Did Zach King give you an answer yet? Marvin asked her on the third day. I've spoken with some realtors, but until we have an answer from Zach, I don't feel right about listing it. Listing it? The farm? With the realtors. I think it only fair that Zach get first chance. He hasn't answered me. Naomi hated to admit it, but she was hurt. Zach hadn't even come around to ask how the packing was going. Nor had he come around to check on Ben and how he was faring with the prospect of moving, and the two of them were close. You can ask Zach yourself, Marvin. Perhaps he's been getting the finances he needs to buy the place. Marvin looked down at the box Naomi was filling with knickknacks from the front room. You taking that stuff? Naomi paused, her hands falling to her sides. You don't think I should? He shrugged. Doesn't look too important to me. Inwardly, Naomi balked. Since he was forcing this move on her, the least he could do was be more supportive. He must have noticed her reaction. Don't listen to me, Naomi. If Ruth was here, she'd scold me for being cold-hearted. Naomi smiled. She liked her sister-in-law. In truth, it would be nice to see her again. Ruth would be right. Marvin laughed. Is Zach out in the fields today? I haven't seen him. Well, if you do, tell him I need to talk with him. So do I, she thought. But since Marcy's leaving, Zach had seemed to disappear right along with her. Marvin wandered off, and Naomi stood up. She straightened to her full height and decided that she was going to get an answer from Zach once and for all. He either wanted the farm or he didn't. This silly business of ignoring her question had gone too far. She tossed down her apron and marched out to the barn to hitch up the pony cart. She'd go to Zach's home herself. Granted, it wasn't the normal course of action for an Amish woman. In fact, Mary would scold her heartily if she knew what Naomi was doing. But right then, Naomi didn't care. She'd be leaving the district soon, anyway, so what did it matter now? She hollered to Marvin to please watch the children, and she didn't wait until he had a chance to question her. Marvin would have a fit, too, if he knew what she was planning to do. She quickly got about the business of hitching up Myrtle. The faster she got the horse hitched up, the faster she could leave. Since Isaac's passing, Naomi had gotten a lot of practice with hitching up a horse, and it did her in good stead right then. Within minutes, Myrtle was secure to the pony cart, and she was trotting down the drive and out to the road. Naomi ignored her misgivings about her mission. She knew Zach lived with his folks, and she prayed that they wouldn't be the ones to answer the door. Within 15 minutes, she'd arrived. She'd never been to the King farm before, and she wasn't sure whether Zach lived in the main house or the Dottie house. Her bravado had completely faded, and she suddenly felt foolish and just plain wrong to be approaching either one of the houses. Then she spotted an outbuilding whose door was open. Perhaps if she wandered that direction, she'd meet Zach without having to go to the front door at all. She slipped down from the cart and cautiously approached the open door. Inside was a woodworking shed. Piles of sawdust lay on the floor, and she heard the scraping sounds of what she thought might be a chisel or a planer. She peeked further inside and saw Zach bent over a board, his hair hanging in tendrils over his forehead and a look of complete concentration on his face. She stood a moment and watched him. Admiration for him burned in her chest. He was such a fine person. She hated that he'd been hurt again with Marcy's return, for she knew without asking that it had hurt him. But he'd rejected Marcy. And that had to have been a victory for him, no matter how painful. She leaned her head against the wooden doorframe and watched the muscles in his arms ripple as he hammered the chisel into the wood. What was he making, anyway? She couldn't see it clearly from her vantage point. Zach must have felt her presence, for he abruptly looked up. When he saw her, he dropped both the chisel and the hammer. He stared at her. She flushed. "Zach. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you." He stepped quickly in front of what he was working on, as if to hide it. "What are you doing here?" She winced at his curt tone. Wasn't he happy to see her at all? Well, I need an answer from you. About the purchase? Jaw. She held her breath. Her heart raced as she stared at his dark expression. Was he angry? He didn't move. She stuttered. You haven't been around the last couple days. I was worried. He nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. No need to worry. She took one step forward. Still, I did worry. His eyes clung to hers, analyzing her, assessing her. She squirmed under his gaze, wondering what he was thinking. What he was hiding on the work table behind him. She took another step closer. Couldn't he see the love she had for him? Couldn't he sense her longing for him? For his touch, however brief? Still, he didn't move. What are you working on? She asked. Somehow, she knew that whatever was hidden behind his back was somehow vital to her. And to him. Another step. His eyes searched her face, reaching into her thoughts. Can I see? She asked, tilting her head toward the space behind him. Without taking his eyes from hers, he moved aside. There on the table was a sign. A beautiful, carved sign. She immediately saw the words bed and breakfast in bold, thick letters. But the spot where the word Byler's had been carved was sanded over. She moved closer, bending over the wood. Byler's was mostly gone, and in its place the word King's appeared. It wasn't finished, and right then, it looked a bit of a mess, but she could clearly see what he was doing. She jolted back, as if she'd been punched. He was going to take over her bed and breakfast. He planned not only to buy her farm but to take her business. She clasped her heart and nearly doubled over from the realization. He could hardly wait till she was gone before he swooped in and took it all. She gulped hard, and tears flooded her eyes. She choked out, but couldn't continue. Naomi? He moved to her and reached out for her arm. Naomi? She jerked back, harder. You're taking my bed and breakfast? She stared at him with raging accusation in her eyes. She didn't even know why she was so upset. She was leaving. She'd offered him the farm. What difference did it make if he continued with the bed and breakfast, too? She turned and fled from the shop. Blindly, she clambered into the pony cart and snapped the reins. Naomi, he cried behind her. Wildly, she hollered at Myrtle to get going. They hadn't gone more than a yard or two, when Zach caught up and reached into the cart, grabbing the reins from her hands and yanking back. Myrtle snorted and stopped short. "Naomi? What are you doing? Getting out of here. Getting away from you." Through her tears, she saw the shock and pain on his face. He shook his head, his mouth open and his face flushed. "Naomi? Quit saying my name. You want it all, don't you? My farm and my business." She was mortified at herself. She was not making a lick of sense. He wasn't taking anything from her. She had offered the farm to him, and she was leaving. No. No. He shook his head and desperation was on his face. "You don't understand." "I understand just fine," she cried. "You don't even care that I'm leaving." He dropped the reins then and grabbed her face with his calloused hands. Without any hesitation at all, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. His kiss sent the pit of her stomach into a wild, shocked swirl. Stunned, she pushed back, gasping. "What are you doing? Don't you understand? Haven't I made myself clear?" "What?" she cried. "Made yourself clear? All you've made clear is that you don't care a fig that I'm leaving. All you've made clear is that you're angry at me for some reason." She took a great heaving breath and glared holes through him. He shook his head. "Naomi, Naomi. Quit saying my name." The man was stark raving mad. "I won't quit saying your name. I won't." He touched her cheek, brushing the back of his hand against it in a gesture so tender, so sweetly gentle, that Naomi burst into tears. "Ah, Naomi," he whispered. "I want you to marry me. Don't you see? The bed and breakfast would become King's bed and breakfast. I wanted to surprise you." His eyes filled with tears. "Please say you will. Please, Naomi. Say you'll marry me." She blinked rapidly and let his words settle into her brain, into her heart. Her mouth dropped open. "You want to marry me?" she uttered. "I love you." He stood stiffly, as if afraid she would disappear. "I have for a long time now." "Zach." He grinned at her, and it was as if all the world's light broke forth on his face. "Quit saying my name." She laughed then, a joyous sound enveloping both of them. "Never," she teased. "I will never stop saying your name." "Zach." Naomi's voice had gone breathless. "I love you, too." He put his arms around her and lifted her from the cart, setting her feet gently on the grass. She lay against him, snuggling her head beneath his chin. He kissed the top of her cap and let out a sigh of obvious relief. But Naomi couldn't stay still. She pulled away. "But all this time, I didn't think you cared about me at all. You never said a thing." Zach cast his eyes to the ground and went quiet. Then he looked at her. "I didn't think you cared about me. You were still reeling from Isaac's death." His eyes misted over. "And then, just as I thought you were healing, Justin Moore came into the picture." Naomi flushed at his reference to the handsome Englischer. "I'm sorry. I was a fool. Like you said, I was still reeling, and I was hurting. I wasn't thinking straight." He took both of her shoulders in his firm grasp. "I know you were hurting. And I was, well, I didn't handle Justin's appearance at the bed and breakfast well. If I'd known how you felt." He shook his head. "No, Naomi. It wouldn't have made a difference." She looked into his eyes, and she'd never been so certain of anything in her life. "But it would have. I wouldn't have accepted Justin's sign, nor would I have welcomed him to stay again at the bed and breakfast. It would have made a great deal of difference. A great deal." He gave a slight intake of breath and bent down to kiss her again. Raising his mouth from hers, he gazed deeply into her eyes. So is that a yes? You marry me? She nodded as the tears coursed down her cheeks. I'll marry you. Of course, I'll marry you. He grinned, and for a split second, she thought he would burst into tears, too. Then he asked, shall we tell the children? Right away. She could hardly contain her excitement. Do you think they'll be all right with it? She smiled. Ben will be over the moon. And Katie, our dear Katie, she'll come around. And right quick, I'm thinking. Zach squeezed her to him and then let her go. He tenderly helped her back into the pony cart, and she scooted over on the bench to make room for him. He climbed up and the cart dipped under his weight. Shall we go? Naomi nodded and looped her arm through his jaw, she said, and her voice was full of eager consent. Epilogue. The ride back from Zach's house in the pony cart seems like a precious dream to me now. I think of that short trip often, remembering the joy that burst through me at every turn, and remembering how I glanced up at Zach constantly, feeling the need to reassure myself that he was really there, beside me. I couldn't wait to get back to tell the children. And I couldn't wait to tell Mary. I didn't have to leave. I could stay in Hollybrook for the rest of my days. Never, for an instant, did I think I would fall in love again after Isaac died. If I ever remarried, I figured it would be mostly for my children's sake. For them to have a father figure in their lives, and for all of us to have someone to help provide for us. I never thought I'd fall so deeply in love with another man. But I did. I love Zach so much that sometimes it takes my breath away. I don't think of Zach in comparison to Isaac. I don't really even think of him as my second husband. There's no need. Isaac's and my life chapter together is complete. A cherished, much-loved memory. But Zach is my husband in his own way, and our love is unique in that it belongs to just the two of us. God has indeed blessed me far beyond what I ever dreamed possible. When we got back to my farm that afternoon, Marvin was pacing the porch. He was angry, but when he saw Zach with me, his expression turned first to curiosity and then relief. I knew he thought Zach was coming to tell him that he'd purchased the farm. When Zach shared his real intent, Marvin collapsed in a rocker and stared at us. I couldn't help but giggle. Seeing Marvin speechless for once in his life did my heart good. I went upstairs to find Ben, and when I told him the news, he flew down the steps and into Zach's arms. The two of them remained like that, pressed together tightly for the longest time. I stood by and wept to see it. I wept for Isaac and all that he was missing. But mostly, I wept with joyous contentment that Ben was being given the gift of a second father. Katie reacted much as I thought she would. Hesitant at first. Grumpy about it, too, if the truth be told. But Zach's quiet presence at every dinner for the following week softened her. And when she saw that her uncle approved, that went in Zach's favor, too. And of course, Katie wouldn't have to leave her best friend, which was a very nice thing for her. Since the marriage, she's come fully around. She even bakes a pie every now and then for Zach. If any of us touches it, she playfully slaps our hands away and announces that it's for Zach's appetite only. My family back in Pennsylvania was shocked at the news, to say the least. But I ended up getting kind letters from most of them. Marvin's assessment of Zach's fine character helped. They were especially mollified when I told them we'd try to make a trip out east to visit them soon. But we won't be going for a while. Zach and I are awaiting our first baby. The little one is due come August. A busy time, to be sure, what with the harvesting and the canning to be done. But I have Mary to help me. And Katie. Together, we will do just fine. As for King's bed and breakfast, it is humming along. I usually have guests once or maybe twice a week, which is enough for now. It would be hard to handle more. My life is full and happy. Oh, sometimes it feels like it's overflowing, which after the last 2 years is wonderful, indeed. I probably should mention that the Sign King's bed and breakfast looks right fine at the end of the drive. On more than one occasion, I've stood before it solely to admire its beauty. It does a good job of bringing in new guests, too. The end. Thank you for listening to Naomi's Choice by Brenda Maxfield. If you missed the first 2 books in this 3-book series called Naomi's Story, you can find them on this channel. Byler's Bed and Breakfast is Book 1, followed by The Englischer Stayed Twice, Book 2. Be assured that all Brenda's books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Brenda Maxfield, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Brenda Maxfield Amish romance.